Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us to this Workers' Voices. I'm very, very happy to welcome all of you from where you are living. I think some of you are living in a place where it's already the night, and some of you, depending on the time zone, you are in the morning. So I want to thank you very much and to welcome you to this Workers' Voices. My name is Mamadou Soare. I am the head of communications and publications at the theILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities. Today, we would like to discuss about social protection. Social protection is, as you know, one of the very, very important topic for many workers around the world. Actually, only 45% of the global populations are effectively covered by at least one social protection benefit. But unfortunately, we have to say that in this period of pandemic due to the COVID-19, more than 4 billion people remain unprotected. So what are the obstacles to realize universal social protection? And what could be the role of the ILO and also governments, employers, and workers' organizations to extend this social protection to all? With me today, I'm very, very pleased to welcome Mrs. Claudia Menne from the Confederation of German Trade Unions, DGB, Germany, and also Mr. Bheki Ntshalintshali, who is the General Secretary of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, from South Africa. Welcome to both of you, and thank you very much for joining us today, Claudia and Bheki. Before we start, let me welcome also our audiences who are now watching us from Zoom and also from Facebook. As you see, the event is rightly live streamed now on Facebook, and many people will watch this video, which is recorded. We want you from the audiences to be part of these conversations. So please send us any questions that you have, and we will be happy to convey them to our two panelists. So let me turn to you first, Claudia. My first question to you will be to know, what is your experience from Germany regarding social protection?
Yes, thank you, Mamadou. Thank you to everybody, and welcome from Germany. Heartily welcome to, and yeah, maybe you know that Germany has a quite, if I may say so, sophisticated system which was built in more than 1 century. So we have a long experience, and we have a system which consists in principle of a contributory system and a non-contributory system in the meantime. And also with the reunification process, you know, when West Germany and East Germany came together, we had to rebuild a lot of this system. But all in all, we have a quite good and well-established and good designed, if I may say so, system. And yeah, in the COVID-19 crisis now, I don't know how much we go into the details. This system was also challenged, it's clear. So we had to react very quick as trade unions, because our governments, parliaments at regional level, but also companies, they also, to some extent, they try to have enormous decisions and important decisions to be taken in a very short period of time. And we had to be very vigilant to see also that standards did not erode or deteriorate. And this is mainly also because of layoffs, but some other problems we had, like all other workers in the world. And there was a huge bunch of things we had to do as trade unions. So mainly the system is built, as I said, on contributory systems and non-contributory. And we had to see in all these in cash, in benefits, in kind, where we can improve also the situation during the corona crisis, which is not still over. And then we have to see how to rebuild maybe also some parts and lessons learned after this crisis. But maybe we go into the detail later on.
Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe I speak too long. So sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's always good to have also your experience. I think it is clear that there are still challenges regarding social protection, including Germany, which is a very well-developed country. Let me now turn to Bheki also to understand and to listen to him regarding his own experience from South Africa regarding social protection. Over to you, Brother Bheki.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all. Indeed, South Africa is a developing country We got a number of social protection system, but there are many disjointed. There are those that are covered the elderly, there are those covering disability, people with disability, there are those that are covering children grant, and etc. and etc. There are those that are contributory, as Claude has been saying, for the workers. But they are disjointed, they are not uniform, and there are a lot of other people that are not covered, particularly those that are described to be in the informal sector, vulnerable sector, or kind of precarious work. So the effort has been trying to have one system that covers for everybody. We're not there as yet. But the COVID-19 exposed us in a great deal for companies who are deducting the insurance to cover these workers, but they never forwarded the money to the authorities in government. And it also indicated that because of the informal sector, that those workers that are on the borderline, we don't know whether this is self-employed, this is a austerity, kind of precarious work, vulnerable, and etc. So what it suggested to all of us is that we need a universal social protection that cover everybody, both horizontally, then we can discuss the vertical one. But we're not there as yet.
So let me continue with you, Bheki. You said that in South Africa as well, there are some challenges which are still continuing from there regarding social protections. So as you know, workers' organizations strongly support the need of social protection, and effective social dialogue is very important if you want to reach out to these social protections. In your view, how can social dialogue can be an asset to strengthen social protection systems and also achieve a greater impact in recovering from the COVID-19 crisis?
Firstly, we believe that every country can afford social protection. The issue is to what degree, but horizontally, every worker should be protected by social protection. And there are systems within government to do that one, whether we do it through the tax or we do it other means. But the bottom line and the starting point is that there has to be a will to introduce social protection. And it should not be seen as a cost. It should be seen as an investment. Because when you put money to the hands of the people, it means you put back to the economy, you activate your economy, and we are going to be able to protect, but we're going to put people to the labor market. So the first thing to us is that there has to be political will that it can be done, it can be affordable in terms of your size. The second issue is that when it is done, it must be done thoroughly in terms of being sustainable and being contributed in a particular way. Once we do that, then we can be able to see as to why people have to depend on social protection. Many people should not be depending on social protection if we are discussing the issues, mainly the question of the living wage, giving people what they need. Nobody wants to live on a social protection. It should be a falling back for those that are unable to fend for themselves. But there has to be a political will, and I think if we all agree to that one, we'll be able to do it.
Thank you, Bheki. I am now turning to Claudia. Same question to you. What are, in your view, the benefit of social dialogue to reinforce social protection?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, when it comes to coverage, it is very important that there are good collective agreements in place and that we can improve the conditions maybe already put in place by the government. As Bheki said, political will is important, and the government is primarily responsible for setting up attractive systems, also inclusive systems, but nevertheless with social dialogue and with collective agreements, we can improve the situation. And this is also something we saw in the crisis period now, that there are already quite good relationships. So not everybody in Germany is covered by collective agreements. That's a big problem, that less and less coverage is there. But where there was good relationship, it was easier also to negotiate benefits and to increase maybe the level of of the national allowances which were paid out. For example, we had a huge impact on the short-time work allowances, a tool which was very much helpful already in the financial crisis, which normally is only available for some branches, for example, construction sector in winter, but it was extended to all branches which were hit by the corona crisis. And on top of it, we could negotiate with employers an extra amount of money which was paid then to workers which were not able to work during the crisis. This is one example where a social dialogue is very helpful and can be more and have achieved better as a result.
Thank you, Claudia. I think we all agreed on the fact that social protection is very important and every worker around the world should have social protection benefits. But the major challenge is the financing gap in social protections. The big question is who will pay for social protections? Let's see some solutions to explore in this video that we want to launch in a few seconds.
The COVID-19 crisis has revealed the catastrophic impact of the lack of social protection coverage for 4 billion people around the world. Social security is a human right, and the acute need for social protection is more evident today than ever before. However, 55% of the global population is completely unprotected. This is linked to insufficient progress in closing social protection financing gaps. To guarantee at least basic income security and access to essential health care for all and close the annual financing gap for 2020 alone, developing countries must invest approximately $1.2 trillion. On average, this is 3.8% of their GDP. For low-income countries, however, they represent about $80 billion of this total financing gap, which means around 15.9% of their GDP. National and international efforts to mitigate the COVID-19 crisis, as we have seen, have provided some short-term financing assistance, but this is nowhere enough to close the gaps that are needed. Now, many options exist to increase the fiscal space for extending social protection to everyone, such as increasing the taxation level, or eliminating illicit financial flows, or reallocating public expenditure. Now, while creating fiscal space through domestic sources is a priority, this option is not going to be enough for most low-income countries, where the social protection financing gap is extremely high compared to their very limited fiscal capacity. Therefore, domestic resource mobilization has to be complemented by international resources based on global solidarity. Closing these gaps is both necessary and achievable. With concerted political will, we can make this happen, and we can make social protection for all a reality.
Let me now turn to you, to Claudia, and also to Bheki. You watched this video, and the good thing is there is a hope. It's not an unreal, it's not a utopia. There is a way to finance this gap or in social protections. But what do you think from the workers' perspective? What do you think about the financing of the gap in social protection? Claudia?
Yes, I can very much agree with the video and the messages in the video, but when you come to national levels, you have to negotiate how this taxation, how to create this fiscal space. This is one very important option. And then it must be also clear that the contributory side cannot be only on the side of the workers, that employers must contribute, and other sources as taxation has to be included in such a system. And I'm very happy that we can discuss this also at this conference, at the ILO, in the recurrent discussion, because this is very, very important also for the future, not for the short term, but for the long term, that we have different sources of resources to put together so that we have an adequate level on social protection floors.
Thanks, Claudia. The question is now to you, Bheki. What's your view regarding this challenge of financing the gap in social protection?
I think we have to accept is the reality. But it's a reality that is not insurmountable. It's not an issue that any government should come out and say, no, we are poor, we cannot be able to finance it. It is an acknowledgement that countries are not developing at the same level. But social protection should not be seen as the lower part of the budget, that we can spend a lot of money for ministers and for government to procure arms and other things that are not necessary for the people. It should be an element to protect your own people. It's a responsibility first and foremost for government. Secondly, is the responsibility for business. They must not see it as an expenditure, but as a cost, but as an investment. So if we can come to the conclusion that it's something that we all need to do, then it makes it easier to find a solution because we got a common understanding. In the video, it shows where money goes: illicit flow, taxation evasion, taxation avoidance, and etc. It means illegal, illicit, if they can be eliminated, it will give us more money that we can spend on our people. Our people does not need to just go for social protection. They need jobs. So if those money are, corruption is eliminated, money is made available, we can create inclusive economic growth, we can create more jobs and people will come out of the grid of social protection. But it can be done. But we need to also agree that because countries are not developing at the same pace, some international solidarity is needed. It should not be seen as an excuse for any government not to invest in this matter, but it must be seen that we are one human race and we need to develop together and no one should be left behind. So we need to assist those developing companies. That's why when we talk about the ILO role of ensuring that this is being done, it's going to be a good example taking and moving forward.
Thank you, Bheki. You mentioned two very important elements. One, it is the importance of the role to be played by government and business in order to finance these social protections, and also the need at international level to have a global solidarity. And this is also a way to talk about the importance of multilateralism in order to address this challenge of social protections. Let's now explore different strategies to extend these social protections, as we say, for all workers. How can the obstacles, in your view, Bheki, how can the obstacle presented by persistent informality and also transformations in the world of work be overcome to achieve universal social protection to all?
First and foremost, we have already taken some resolution that we must move away from informality to formal work in all respect. But we need to take a view that people are the same. Whether you are in informal or informal, there are needs that need to be protected. So we need to find a system because people don't want things to be done for themselves all the time. They want to make a contribution. We need to find out what kind of a system we can use to ensure that even those that are involved in the self-employment, informal and vulnerability, they can be covered. But at the same time, we must accept that in any economy, there will be no full employment. There will be people there and there that they will not be in the employment, and therefore the responsibility of us. Remember, the state does not have money. The state is carrying the money that we as taxpayers contribute. That money must be distributed fairly. It must be able to help those who are vulnerable and be able to be brought back to the labor market. In my view, therefore, we should not be seeing the question of the informality and the vulnerability as a scare, that we are afraid to deal with those particular issues. We must confront it. We must ensure that there's a decent work for all, there's a protection for all, and therefore we can find a system. What is the best way of ensuring that those who cannot contribute to the social protection, we as a citizen, we as the society, global society, will look at them. And there are many examples in many other countries where this matter has been dealt with. And even the developing countries should not be afraid to engage in that system.
Thank you, Bheki. One key word that you mentioned, and I think it is very important to recall, that is the fact that we should not be fear about informal economy, and we need to address it correctly in order to address and to extend social protection to these categories of workers who are representing more than the half of the world populations. Let me now turn to Claudia. In your view, again, how can we achieve universal social protection from your perspective?
Yeah, I can agree very much with what was said by Bheki, that social protection for all is what we want to achieve, and also the ILO is very clear on this, and we can support and we demand this for everybody. But you know, also maybe in Germany, informality is growing. It is a phenomenon that is not going away, and we have more and more gaps in coverage, not only unemployed, but also people seeking to transition for going into the European market and coming back, for example. Also this form of what we say migrant workers is a problem. We have some questions about how to cover families, how to cover also some parts when it comes to female occupation. So there are a lot of challenges ahead of us in all countries, and we have to find a way how this protection can be extended on the one hand, and the coverage is better, and the adequacy is better. And this is a task where governments have a very leading role, and politics, but we as social partners, as trade unions, we also can challenge the governments, but we can also try to negotiate with companies that there are extensions to other groups in the labor market, but also in the country, where they can be better covered. And this is something we need to have as a joint work. If I give you the example of transport workers, for example, who are traveling around Europe, how they can be protected in all forms, this is some questions which we need also to address at an international level, not only as a national level. And there's this coordination of systems is very crucial, so that you can be covered over the whole a lifetime period and not only in specific situations in your lifetime.
Thank you, Claudia. I think before we close the sessions, I just want to remind to the participant that there will be a possibility maybe to take at least 1 or 2 questions from the chat and see if we have time for the panelists to respond to that. But before, let me ask you one question. You are both attending the 109 sessions of the International Labour Conference here in Geneva, which brings together workers, employers, but also governments. So what are the actions and measures that the ILO should undertake, in your view, to strengthen its leadership in the multilateral system and achieve a universal access to social protections? Let me start with you, Claudia.
Yeah, so I can continue in saying that coordination in the system is very important, and the ILO has already played a crucial role over the last decade in developing standards like the recommendation on social protection and also the convention. So we need we have this level already in place, and it needs to be accepted also by other players in the world economy and also in the multilateral system. And I think this form of accepting this leadership role and the concept which is already there is very important, and we have to encourage the ILO together, but also governments, that this leadership role is accepted within this dialogue at international level. And we had to lobby and to convince other players in the multilateral system like the World Bank or the IMF that social protection is an integral part of social spending floors, and that is not only something, as Bheki has said, which comes at the end of any debate, and this is part of a broader policy concept. And this is very important, and also to acknowledge and recognize and ratify the conventions already in place.
Thank you, Claudia. There are many questions coming from the chat, but I want to select one due to the time. There is one question asking what could be the role of trade unions in order to influence governments to ratify international labor standards linked to social protections. What's your view on this, Claudia? And then we will come to Bheki.
Yeah, at national level, we have to address it in the government, but we need to have the parties in the parliament who assist us so that these conventions can be ratified and implemented also. And then we have a control function also to see that not only the ratification takes place, but implementation is very important. And there we have possibilities as trade unions to be part of the system, as our ILO does also in setting up a system, but also in controlling and maybe sitting in the supervisory mechanism of these boards, of these systems, so that we can have an overview and also the control, what happens with the money and how we can influence also the distribution of the contributions, which is very important, as Bheki said, that we have to have a fairly distributed system and when we collect money for social protection.
Thank you. Question to you, Bheki, coming from the chat, as I said, what could be the role of unions in order to influence government to ratify different conventions and recommendations from the international labor standards regarding social protections?
I think firstly is the question that trade unions should promote and should strive for social dialogue, because you can't speak from anywhere unless you are able to formalize the social dialogue and the acknowledgement that these are one of the fundamental rights of the ILO for a trade union to have a stake and to be able to communicate the interest of the people that they represent and their families. I must say, not only workers, but the workers and their families. Social dialogue is one of the key issues that is important. The second one is relating to what Claudia has said. The ILO, I think, has a role to promote the ratification of the convention and the recommendation. Not only the ratification, because there are countries who ratify, but they never implement it. So there has to be an implementation. So what it means that the member states, when you ratify, you must be committed to implement your ratification in dealing with this. And secondly, is the issue in relation to the surveys that the ILO is conducting. Because through the COVID, the ILO has managed to tell us that 55% of the population are not covered by social protection. That work must continue because it is that work that will tell us whether we're progressive or we're regressing in terms of the social protection. But also the ILO, I think, is the body that can assist many governments in terms of giving the capacity how, and we together with SASA, how to set it up, the social protection, how to make sure that it is funded, how to make sure that it is sustainable. And the question of the World Bank, I think it is the ILO within the UN system to be able to advise the World Bank what needed to be done, but more strongly to talk to the IMF that when the IMF is giving assistance, it can't use that assistance to tell the states, cut social protection to be able to come out from your debt. It can't be. That is a ring fence right that must be protected by all. But lastly, the ILO should be given budget. We can argue here that whatever come out of this recurrent discussion on the social protection, the governing body must ensure that the budget is set aside for the ILO to be able to do its work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bheki, and also Claudia. But before we close, maybe I want to ask you one last question. What could be your takeaway, your final message to unions first, but also to all the participants who are watching this live interview? What could be your takeaway from you, Bheki?
My takeaway from this issue is that the work that we're dealing with is not surmountable. It can be achieved. Many summit has taken the decision in Africa and Asia that social protection is the right, is a human right. It must be extended to all people. That decision should not be a debate. what at the national level must be debated is the horizontal in other words, how much can we afford? But it must be based on the principle that we must all do. So what we can appeal to this meeting in the ILC is to adopt a strong resolution around the social protection. It has to be a universal right for all people.
Thank you, Bheki. Same question to you, Claudia. What could be your takeaway from these conversations?
So many things, I don't know when to stop. But first of all, recurrent discussions are very important. You know that we have to adapt, and therefore it is very timely that we have these recurrent discussions. We know that in 2023 we will continue, and this is so important. And as Bheki said, we need strong messages so that the ILO, which is very much at the forefront of all these things, is heard and can be transmit also the messages. And secondly, we need to have really the will, as this was said several times, that all these lives who had passed away through the crisis are not in vain, so that we learn our lessons, that we protect not only lives but also livelihoods. And this is a very important thing we have to do in the future from today. So this is everything what we have to achieve, and protection for all is possible. I agree with Bheki. It is not surmountable. We can achieve it.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank you also to you, Bheki, for these very interesting discussions on social protections. As you mentioned, the discussions is not finished. We will continue on this because there are still work to be done in order to achieve universal social protection to all. I want also to thank our audiences who are watching this live interview via Zoom, but also via social media. Before we close these sessions, please pencil on your agenda 2 important rendezvous during the conference. The first one is the Workers' Voices series that we will continue next Saturday at 5 p.m. And we would like to discuss on other topics for workers, and you are most welcome to attend this Workers' Voice series. You will see that the next sessions will be on the 12th, and then we will have another one on the 17th and the 19th of June during the closing of the first part of the conference. The other big rendezvous where you are welcome also, and I want really to invite you, is the ILC Daily Show, where we have several guests and ILO experts who will explore about the different challenges linked to the world of work. So you are most welcome as well to attend these 2 rendezvous. So please stay connected with us. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye to all of you. Thank you very much.